When you're selling a product, you really need to stand behind it, and you're really selling yourself when you're selling a product. So you have to believe passionately about what you're doing, and you also have to believe that you would consume the product and be a buyer of that.
Hi, this is Mike Pascai. I'm the host of the Slate podcast, The Gist. Work for NPR for a dozen or so years, and I am here with Pete Moore, who is many things, a friend of mine, but also a dream architect. And not only is he going to define what that means, because I was looking, right now it is not a code that you could fill out on your IRS forms, and they know which standard deductions to take. So we're going to find out what a dream architect is, and if he could possibly architect your dreams, or if that will be up to code. Hello, Pete. Thanks for joining me.
Mike, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
I like this title, Dream Architect, and we'll get to it, but let's not tease it and leave it out there. Give me a definition of what that means, and then I want to take the listener into how you became one and how you can work that magic for someone else. So what is it?
Sure. So a number of people who are entrepreneurs come to us and ask us to evaluate their ideas and to help them take it to the next step. And I think when you start a business and you turn your passion into a profession, there are many steps that you need to take in order to do it properly. And I think a lot of people get inundated with, I've got 100 things to do. But actually what you do is you have a sequential 100 things to do. And what I want to try and be known for through Integrity Square, which is the investment and advisory firm that we have, as well as just creating the Halo sector and companies that are going to be doing good things for people and keeping this world healthy or making this world healthy, is to help them down that path. So if you're an architect, you take a drawing and you turn it into a building.
Right.
And that becomes the blueprint of what you're trying to create. That's your vision.
Right.
In business, you have the same thing, where if I can architect your business plan and I can figure out who your strategic partners need to be, what kind of people you need to hire, where you should be located, what your blueprint looks like for whether it's a health club that you're building, whether it's a fitness studio, whether it's a spa, whether it's a food, beverage company. All these things have a path, and I want to try and help people on that path to take their dream and turn it in and architect it into reality.
Good. I like you using architect as the verb and the noun. And you did mention Halo. Give me a definition. Tell me what that stands for. We'll put it on a shelf of your architected house, and then we'll come back to it. What's Halo?
Sure. So I've been working in the health and fitness industry, which has also been coined the wellness sector, for about 15 years, until I woke up about 4 years ago and said, I just don't like the word wellness, because basically it's coined after getting someone a get well soon card.
Yeah.
And I want to get them well and create a wellness, which the quote was by a guy back in the 1950s, was to get someone on a better path toward taking a little bit better care of themselves. So I think in this era of the knowledge that we have based on nutrition and exercise, you really don't need to experiment. Like, how to lead a path to feeling amazing and probably not getting sick if you take good care of your body and your mind. So came up with the term HALO, which stands for Health, Active Lifestyle, Outdoors. So instead of trying to go under someone else's sector focus or SIC code, decided, we're going to create the Halo sector. And we're going to create the Halo effect.
So if wellness is just the absence of illness, Halo is an elevation of that, much like a halo is with an angel. It sits atop that ideal.
Correct. So if you start off as amazing, nothing's going to take you down. And we think that there are entrepreneurs that are creating companies that are going to keep you amazing and make you feel great about who you are when you wake up and when you go to sleep. And there's no reason why we can't just keep that path going. Why do we have to get sick and then get well? Let's just stay Halo.
Let's talk biography and how your biography shaped where you are today. What kind of person are you? When was the first time you realized the kind of person you were?
Well, I think it's a great question. I think it probably actually started back in Westbury, where I grew up. At the age of 8, I was the goalie of my soccer team. Now, I was goalie for all the wrong reasons, because I saw all these kids running around, and I decided, you know what, I can actually use my hands as a soccer goalie, which is quite a benefit. And also, I don't have to run. So it was perfect. And at the same time, it kind of coincided with my father having a change holder, which I had complete access to. So I had access to change every time the ice cream truck would come down the block,
Yeah.
I'd go and hoard as much of those quarters as I could.
What kind of change holder? Like the kind that they had at the arcade where you go
No.
cha-ching, cha-ching, just a
No,
purse?
it was kind of like, like something that you made in like ceramics
Okay.
class.
Did you make it for him,
I
actually?
probably did.
Yeah, okay.
Actually, it was probably a little more old school. It was probably something passed down from like my grandmother
It's
or
an
something.
heirloom from the old country.
Yeah,
This
it
change
was
holder.
wilted. It wasn't something that you'd like sell at a yard
Yeah,
sale. It's
yeah.
something to be still left after
Yeah,
the yard sale.
yeah.
So I used to buy a lot of Big League Chew and Fun Dip, and I used
Yeah.
to hide it under my radiator before I went to sleep. And I used to eat a lot of sugar.
Wow.
Before I go to sleep, I'd wake up with like gum on my pajamas, and so I got a little heavy.
Fun Dip, the least redeemable of all the candies. It's not candy about anything other than just it's a pure sugar delivery system.
It's probably
that and Pixie Sticks.
It's only second to like candy cigarettes back in the day.
Yeah.
This is probably
Yeah.
the worst. The second worst thing.
Wow.
that-
So
that was
this
out
is going to
there.
be a bigger leap to the wellness/Halo sector than I thought if we start off
Clearly.
with the Pixie Sticks.
So I got a little chubby as a kid, and I used to have to go into the husky section of Sears, where you get elastic jeans, which was not fun psychologically or physically. So I decided to be a soccer goalie, and then I realized, like, as you're the soccer goalie, that you're kind of responsible for making sure the team doesn't lose. So I'm not really responsible for the team winning, but I'm responsible for the team not losing, which kind of took on its own layer of responsibility back when I was like 8 to 10 years old, and then I actually became pretty good as a soccer goalie and became better as an athlete. So I think basically being a team player, being on the defense, and being the last layer of defense kind of has shaped who I am, where I'm not looking to tell you, hey, I scored 5 goals or I hit these home runs. I'm the defenseman. So I kind of feel as like the dream architect. I'm trying to help people succeed, and I am not looking for the accolades of that. I want to be behind the scenes and make sure we win.
So you were not the all-county basketball player, but what you did was you limited the all-county basketball player to his fewest points per game, I believe.
That is true. It was back in junior and senior year. It was Derek
Brown?
Derek Brown,
Yeah.
yes, who played for, I believe, Cary.
Yeah.
So I used to
And
have
he
to
eventually
guard
went
him.
on to St. John's.
Went to St. John's. I think he scored 28 against Indiana one
Yeah.
game, and I was like, yeah, I held that guy to 7 points.
7 points. The
true.
guy's
Newsday.
putting up 28 on Bobby Knight, but Pete Moore holds him to 7 points.
Check Newsday back in 89-90
Yeah,
edition.
it's all there.
Probably page 62 or something.
It's all in print.
It's all in print.
Okay,
So
so
I was
you're-
always I was always the defender. I was always
Defender,
the guy.
protector.
Correct.
And so in this role, you're a protector of people's dreams.
Correct. And actually, if you go back to the Latin version of
Yeah.
the word client,
Yeah.
and you go back because I looked this up one day to try and figure out what does a client mean, and most people don't know, but it means someone under your protection. So I tell people, when you're a client of Integrity Square and you're inside the square, that you're really that it's my obligation to protect you. Make sure you don't do bad deals. Make sure you don't get in bed with the wrong people.
Okay, so you mentioned, we defined the Halo sector, and you mentioned Integrity Square. Tell me about that business and how it started.
Sure. So about 7 years ago, April 2010, we started a investment advisory firm focused on helping people buy and sell health and fitness companies. Most of those were health clubs, traditional Gold's Gym, Crunch, Spectrum clubs, some of the bigger chains around the country. So basically, I was more of an advisor. So we do buy-side, sell-side work. Before that, I was part of a firm called Sagent for about 7 years, and making a lot of introductions, trying to place the right capital with the right entrepreneurs or executives. And then with Integrity Square over the last 7 years, it's kind of morphed into more of an advisory firm, but also a growth equity investor to try and put capital behind entrepreneurs and further the Halo sector. So I'll get to later some of the investments we've made, but I'm excited about who we partnered with.
But before Integrity Square, tell me what you did.
Sure. Well, I'll take you back, kind of rewind to when you and I met.
Yeah.
And I might fill in some of the story here. So went to Emory undergrad. Was president of fraternity, so it's kind of the thread of being a leader and being accountable and trying to get everyone to kind of play off the same
Nothing says
Playbook.
accountability more than fraternity leader. It's synonymous with accountability in our society.
I don't think I truly recognize the liability associated with running for head of president of or master of the house.
Yeah.
As I do now. I think when Bill Bois was in Alabama and didn't come back for a couple of days, then I really understood what assets and liabilities were.
Yeah. We were all your children.
In the most financial sense of the word. But from there, I went and worked at Chase Manhattan Bank and got my financial, analyst, internship, if you will. Then I worked at a place called Donaldson Lufkin and Jenrette. Worked in private equity coverage when there were only 40 private equity firms, so we're trying to show them deals to make investments. And then my uncle lived up in Boston and was kept coercing me to apply to Harvard Business School. And two of the guys that I worked for at DLJ and at Chase gave me recommendations there. So I got into Harvard. I spent about the first 4 weeks there calling my dad on probably every other night saying, what am I doing here? I don't know if this is a place I want to be at.
Why? Culture? You're a smart guy. You're definitely an outgoing guy.
When you get into a new pond, it takes you a little while to figure out, do I belong here?
So what were they that you were perceiving yourself as not being?
When you get into a new environment, you're trying to feel out what your place is. And when you go to college, it takes you a little while to figure out, who my friends are and, how can I act and, what level of knowledge do I need? What level of sarcasm can I have? How much work do I have to do? How disciplined, how not disciplined do I want to be? So it took a little while to find that group of friends that I felt comfortable with. And actually, it wasn't until I got cold called at an accounting class and I was able to fill the board as they do in a case study at HBS that I felt confident that, okay, I'm allowed to be here.
So that made you. Your time with the marker.
The time with the marker and about 20 minutes with the professor on the board definitely helped me feel like, okay, I can compete at this level because there were people there that spoke 5 languages and ran, Ford's motor plant in Mexico and someone else who, did a biotech startup and you're like, okay, I just went to Emory, was the All-Row Athlete of the Year.
You were intramural Athlete of the Year, we should say.
I'm sure I put that.
Position.
I'm 100% sure that was in my,
you held
application.
Derek Brown to 7.
I definitely did not put that in there, but I should have. But when I was in business school, I helped start up a company, kind of cut my teeth on the internet with a group called Iron Planet, which was a company that we did for credit as part of a business plan competition. There was a guy from outside the school who put up a posting that said, hey, I'm trying to do an evaluation of a potential internet play in the construction equipment / government disposals. And there's like this dirty market of when the Department of Defense wants to get rid of like some rail car that's used for transporting missiles across the country, that there's like there's one of these like comic book kind of classifieds where you go in and you can buy that and put it in the back of your house if you live in, some area where you got a big backyard and people collect these things. So we had a 4-person team. We put this plan together and we said, look, this doesn't make sense. It's too dirty. But what you could do is do this in the used heavy construction equipment market, which is like John Deere, Caterpillar, Komatsu, Volvo. And we figured out that there was a lot of transaction costs in order to sell a piece of equipment. So we were able to set up a business model where we had people from a company called DynCorp, which was a public company, and they did all the inspections for military bases. They would go out and do the asset inventory. So we got them to go to the places where the equipment was, take pictures. And then we got Lloyd's of London to put a guarantee on that. So it was basically like a certified inspection report.
Right.
And,
and this was pre-Craigslist. This was
1999. This was like before DSL lines.
You created an internet marketplace, whatever Auto Trader is now, for this kind of very specialized equipment.
Exactly. And at first it was called usedequipment.com, and then I was walking past one of these like Salvation Army bins, and it was called like Free the Planet or something. And as we were going through that, when people talk about that industry, they talk about moving iron. So we actually came up and trademarked the term Iron Planet. And as part of that, I was able to get this business plan into the business plan competition. And then the guy who had come to us with the original idea, leave his name out now, he didn't want to take our whole team with him to try and pursue this. So we went to our professor, this guy Warren McFarlane, and we said, look, we got this good idea. We got all these partners lined up. We like the name. I personally had the URL certified under my Pete Moore account. And the guy said, look, life's too short. Like, if you don't trust somebody and this is worth nothing, then you don't want to partner with people that you don't feel good about.
Because you wanted to stick with the other members of the team who got you.
Right. I didn't want to cut my friends out, especially one of my friends who was ready to do this with us. And we were going to figure out a way to split the equity. Make a long story short, that company 17 years later just got sold for $758 million. So sometimes when you start an idea, it takes a really, really long time to reap the rewards of that.
Did you get any piece of that?
Yeah, we got a little piece. A little piece, which I thought at some point was just going to be expensive stock wallpaper. So we got a little piece of that. But the moral of that story is that, I learned about the internet and I was became more of like an evangelist back in the day, and I needed to be able to start ideas. But my background was always in private equity. My father's been a mentor to me and ran a business and kind of taught me to be somewhat conservative back in the day, but I wasn't really having that. And going to Harvard Business School kind of made you like, if you got a good idea and you got a big idea, worst case scenario, you got your business degree from HBS, like you'd be okay.
So I know you worked on so many different kinds of deals, but was there something about the fitness space or the health space that drew you, other than the fact that you were this well chronicled defender?
It actually, it's a good story. So I ended up leaving Harvard Business School, and in about end of March in that year, in 1999, it got really cold, and I used to run around the river every morning, and I'm like, why am I living in Boston or New York? Why don't I go live in Florida? So I ended up finding a job at a firm called Brockway Moran & Partners down in Boca Raton. So at the ripe old age of 27, I moved down to Boca Raton, and I started working down there, and the first deal that was in this $200 million fund was they had a letter of intent to buy Gold's Gym. And I was literally sitting around a table with 12 people in this firm, and I looked around and I figured out I was the only guy with a health club membership, and it owned a tank top, definitely, in the firm. So I raised my hand. I'm like, I want to be on the Gold's deal because we own an aerospace parts company they were buying, the chemical company that does all the blue chemicals in the bathroom and the soap.
Oh, great. But none of them have tank tops associated with them.
Right, no tank tops and no health clubs and no sweat associated with that. And
by the way, is Gold's Gym, is there one Gold Gym, or are they all franchises?
So, great question. So it's a franchise organization. So there was one Gold's Gym in Venice Beach, California, which is known as the Mecca of bodybuilding.
I've been there.
So they had an ability to acquire Gold's in partnership with the largest franchisee that owned, I think at the time, probably 12 clubs. And Brockway Moran was the financing source and equity partner for that deal. So I got on that deal. At the same time, the internet's going crazy. And I just got out of business school, and I'm thinking, like, all right, I know everything about the internet that's going to happen. So I went to Peter Brockway, who's still a good friend, and he's actually an investor in our deals that we do now in Integrity Square. And I said to him, hey, Peter, look, we got to do this internet play with Gold's Gym. And we're going to do goldsgym.com. We're going to do online fitness nutrition. We're going to do sales management software. And he said two things to me. He said, one, Peter, I don't know why you can't put an apostrophe S in goldsgym.com. Okay, so I don't know if
that's not the worst. Obviously.
This is back in 99.
Yeah, it's not the worst comment to make. But I would like possessives to be able to be registered.
No, but he made a great point, and it stuck with me. Like, don't invest in things you don't understand.
Okay.
Right. And second thing is, he was a private equity guy. You don't invest in new technologies as a private equity guy. And he also kind of walked me to the front and said, look, it's called Brockway Moran & Partners. Like, your last name's not on the door. This is my first fund. Why don't you kind of hit the brakes a little here and do what we hired you to do? Mm-hmm. So I spent about 6 months looking at the fitness industry and trying to help with the franchising, licensing with the management team, two guys, John and Kirk Galliani, who are still good friends. But at the same time, in business school, I had been buying AOL Leaps. It's an important part of the story. So a LEAP is a long-term equity appreciation security. So while I was in business school, you could buy a LEAP when AOL was at 20, and instead of having an option that goes out for 3, 6, or 9 months, you could actually go out for 2 years.
So it's like just a long futures
It's a long contract, yeah, on an option. So when I was in business school, AOL was going up like $2, $3, a day, pretty much for no reason, but it kept going up a day. So I ended up taking about $30,000 and bought leaps that would go to 80. It was kind of a sucker bet, but I took it.
Yeah.
And I ended up turning that into about $2.5 million.
Wow.
Okay, so and I didn't know what money was back then anyway, but
what was the timeline for when was AOL going to hit 80? How long were your contracts?
Oh, they were 2 years out.
2 years.
2 years.
Good thing it wasn't like 8 years, though.
Right, true. Yeah, it could have gone up and right back down. But the part of that story that's important is that when I was at Brockway & Rand, I said, okay, look, I understand the internet because I did this Iron Planet, and I got brainwashed at business school. Why don't you start this new idea? If you have one, do it. And at the same time, I'm ticking up my stock account and option account, so I'm thinking like, all right, I'm really smart now. So I went back to Peter Brockway and I said, hey, can I do this goldsgym.com thing? I'll do it on my own because right now I'm thinking, I know a lot more than everyone else. Not that I was right or I was wrong. It's just bad timing. But I ended up starting up a company out in Scottsdale, Arizona with a partner of mine and moved out there on April 1st of 2000, rented a Pontiac Grand Am, lived in AmeriSuites.
Cool.
And hired 30 people, fitness, nutrition, registered dietitians, exercise physiologists, and we created this online fitness nutrition program, and Gold was our first client. And every 2 weeks when we needed money for payroll, I'd just call my broker and I'd say, hey, sell 100 AOL leaps. Well, that lasts, probably 50 payrolls until you're out of money.
Yeah.
But what the class that they didn't teach you at Harvard Business School is like, when do you know to stop playing the game, right? And if
they teach you to believe in yourself too much.
Yeah. So I'm out there in Scottsdale, Arizona, basically in the middle of the desert.
Yeah.
I am. It's September 11th hits, so nobody wants to invest in anything, and everyone's kind of triaging psychologically, physically, and there was kind of a pause in business for several months. But I said, what, my idea is a B2B2C model, and I've got Gold's Gym, and now I had World Gym, now I had Powerhouse. So I had raised some capital from some friends, family, some NFL players, and I said, I'm going to keep going. And I didn't take a salary for about 3.5 years. And everyone that I worked with in the industry, I would go to their house. So I'd go to Lexington, Kentucky, and if you wanted to update the website for a company, then they didn't have Dell computers, and they didn't want to buy a DSL line. This is before smartphones, before Wi-Fi. None of this existed. T1.
Remember those days?
That came and went. Who is the largest provider of T1, and where are they now? So I end up going to all these people's houses, and I'm the only person they know that used to work in investment banking in New York. So I'm actually helping all these people with their financials and also being their web provider. So my nickname was PD Mo. So PD Mo's coming to town. We're going to learn about revenue, EBITDA, and we're also going to do the website. So I basically ran around the country like a lunatic for about 3 years with 2 cell phones. The 561 was my East Coast clients. The 602 was my West Coast clients. And then I didn't have any money left. And I had to keep the servers on. People now think about I'm going to start this company. I'm going to go to Amazon Web Services. I'm going to go to GoDaddy.
Yeah.
None of that existed.
Yeah.
I had a server rack.
You were your own daddy.
Yeah. Well, I was daddy paying for the server. And then when I didn't have any money left, you still get credit cards, because that's the easiest way to get financing. So I used to get a credit card and you'd have to pay AT&T like $11,000. Then I had a kid, definitely had a drinking problem. He was like my integrator or whatever I called him.
We should
Systems
go back and say,
integrator.
You had a kid. You mean you had an employee?
I had an employee.
Yeah. Who had some substance abuse problems.
Yeah, so he had to drive down to the AT&T data center in Phoenix, and you couldn't reset the server remotely. So he had to literally go there, turn it on and turn it off.
Oh, my God.
Okay? And back in the day, it was I had to keep the server on because
was it called the Whopper, like in War Games? Was that what it was?
It was big, yeah.
It was the Whopper?
It had the digitized, blue lights coming out of it and everything. Yeah, and then, people don't appreciate now, but it's the server's down. When the server's down, you can't reboot it.
No,
Thomas has to go down
you need
to
your
the
drinking
data center.
buddy to go down. Yeah.
Yeah. So, just his background, I learned, what it takes to run a business. You got to hire people. When I was in banking, you used to be able to say, okay, let's run this Excel model and increase revenue by 30%. You kind of plug that in as two different cells, and then you go out and into the real world, and you're like, okay, I got to hire people. I got to pay them. I got to train them. I got to get them on the road. I have to build this software. I can't tell people that version 2 is coming out in 90 days because then they don't want to buy version 1. So, and then you got all these bells and whistles that people want to add, and you got customer support when people are on AOL dial-up. You got a 3 meg picture, digitized picture going through a 28.8 modem. Do the math on that. Got a lot of time to shoot the shit for 3 hours while that one picture loads of your group exercise class. So, make a long story short.
It turns out Connie's eyes were closed.
Yeah. So make a long story short, I spent 3.5 years trying to build this company, kind of against the wave, because the technology and the pipeline wasn't really ready yet, and the health club operators really
You
weren't.
weren't wrong. You were just early, which is pretty much the same as being wrong.
Yeah. No, I think it is wrong. I think you got to take a deep breath and say, okay, is the market ready for what I'm going to provide? And if it's not ready, what's a reasonable path to get there? And also, do you want to try and educate someone on fitness and nutrition programs, or do you want to educate people on how can I optimize what your current business is? And the current business was selling membership. So if we stayed with that route, it might have been a lot easier path. But during that time, going back to like the Dream Architect, piece of what we're talking about, we did a deal with Balance Bar once, where Balance Bar wanted to provide samples into the 1,000 health clubs that we had using our software. And at this point, I was like running pretty low on cash. And
is Balance Bar a food or a bar class?
No, the Balance Bar that was owned by Kraft.
Right.
The yogurt, honey nut, peanut, or whatever.
I'm just thinking of these bar classes.
No. This was the actual Balance Bar.
Balance Bar, right?
So they wanted to do a promotion. So we were going to drop ship 5,000 Caramel Nut Blast Balance Bars to all the health clubs, and it was going to be a sampling. And I came up with this brilliant idea at the time, which was I'm going to put down the company address on Cactus Road as one of the health clubs so I can make sure I have food. Okay? So I'm actually somewhat not allergic to, but I can't eat a Caramel Nut Blast
7 times a day
Balance Bar now because it reminds me of not having any money and worrying that the server is going to go down and living on a mattress and picking up the phone saying, Fitness Insight, can I help you?
It's called sense memory.
Yes.
How many of those Balance Bars did you eat?
Oh, you can throw down a lot of samples. It's kind of like taking a big cookie and crunching it up and then putting it outside so you don't know how much you eat.
Can you write the whole Balance Bar recipe book? Do you have a Balance Bar souffle? Have you made a Balance Bar soup?
I've actually, I love the yogurt peanut, but I literally, if I see a Caramel Nut Blast, I'll run the other direction.
Yeah. Okay. So you had money, you made money, you lost money, you had all these different kinds of businesses, you had 30 people. You never stiffed any employees or any contractors.
No, everyone got paid. I also personally guaranteed some debt back in the day and paid those off.
So honest to a fault.
Yeah, I think somebody said to me once, experience is what you get when you don't get what you want. Mm-hmm. So as you mentioned, maybe this idea is too early or the market's not ready for it, or hey, look, you got a great idea, but you got to change its path a little, or you need to stop and focus on your unit economics before you focus on franchising, those types of things. So I think after you see that movie a couple times, you could say, look, I can tell you what's going to happen, or I'm pretty sure that me architecting this plan or helping you think through this plan, you need to pause and make sure that these things are done properly.
So basically, you're saying to people, look, I understand your excitement. I understand that you have this great idea, but I've been there, and here are the pitfalls.
Right.
Live through it.
And I'm not saying look, anybody who's looking at a business and advising, they're going to have their own, overlay of what that is. But I think there are certain business principles that always prevail. Who your customers are. Do they have the capital? Are you solving a frustration? I think a lot of these businesses that come out right now, they're cool and they got all these bells and whistles, but it's people pay for frustrations that are solved. Why am I getting a cup of coffee? Because I'm thirsty. Okay, that's a frustration that you have just solved for me, and it's convenient because it's right in front of me. I have a security system. Why? Because I don't want to be harmed. You've just solved the frustration. Now, if you have some really cool whiz-bang cupcake that comes out, that's got 20 grams of protein, I'm getting my protein somewhere else. I'm not sure that's, the next big thing.
So then why is Tesla, this is totally aside, but by that notion, why is Tesla a good business? Does that solve a frustration? I think it's a new gee whiz thing that maybe a certain class of people are aspirational to have. Or maybe people think that, gas guzzling cars are a frustration if they take environmentalism so seriously.
Yeah, look, I think you touched on, Musk definitely touched on a nerve of, preserving the environment. The reality is that, plugging your car up to an AC adapter, and 30% of that's still powered by coal, you're really not helping anybody, from net basis, marginally. Yeah. But I think it has kind of struck a chord in businesses that are trying to do good things and using that as part of their, not only just part of their marketing, but it actually is how they view their business, like, people, planet, and profit.
Right. Right. Okay, I get that. Now, as we focus back on Pete Moore, you're still in Scottsdale at this point?
I was still in Scottsdale, yeah. And then in November 15th, 2003, Gold's Gym canceled their 3-year agreement because we were running websites for about 300 different clubs, and they all kind of looked similar to the Gold's Gym site, because back in the day, if there's any early stage web developers listening to this, there used to be something called cascading style pages. And a cascading style page is if Mike Pesca had a club in Oceanside and it was called Pesca's Fitness and you were white and red, then you'd have the Gold's Gym site in white and red.
Yeah.
If you were Gold's Gym, you'd have it in black and gold. So Gold's basically came back and said, look, I want an exclusive in the fitness industry. I'm like, I can't do that. At the same time, I went to buy a friend of mine who had a birthday. I was trying to buy him a work belt at Kmart. And I literally went to Kmart. I dropped down 8 different credit cards, and I left Kmart without a work belt. So I was basically busted. And I said at this point, look, I cannot continue down this path of trying to be an entrepreneur. And you got to know that it's time to stop. So I kind of closed up shop there on November 15th. And on November 18th, 2003, I reported to work, basically, for the guys I used to work for at DLJ, who had started up a firm called Sagent and became the co-head of private equity coverage. And then I started up an active lifestyle and wellness group back then because I was okay with the word wellness.
So aside from the experience and insight, what else tangibly did you say from your experience? And a million Cliff balance bars.
Sure. I realized that, when you're selling a product, you really need to stand behind it, and you're really selling yourself when you're selling a product. So you have to believe passionately about what you're doing, and you also have to believe that you would consume the product and be a buyer of that. So I think, people that come in, I don't want to. There's something that happened yesterday. I'll try and synthesize this in the best way. Somebody wanted to do good things in a market that they wanted to basically give back to a city, let's say, and they had this really good idea. And then at the end, I asked the guy, where do you live in this city? He's like, I don't live in that city. It's like, but you want to give back. You want to make change in this area. Like, you have to be in it to win it. You can't just parachute in and out. Like, that's not what people want. Like, that's not how it works. So I think, what I've learned is that if you can stand behind something that you believe in and you love the product and it solves a frustration for you or brings you joy or happiness, then I think that's the kind of job you want, or that's the type of business you want that you can be proud of.
During your time with Sagent Advisors, were you working there and starting Integrity Squared at the same time, or was there a clean break from one to the other?
No, it was a clean break. I mean, I kept funding the software company on the side and paying off some of the debts that I owed because I felt like that was, it's something that you need to feel good about yourself at the end of the day, and you need to really, understand that, the basis of debt and the basis of capitalism is trust, right? So if you don't have that, then you're in a lot of trouble, and then the whole system really falls apart. So I felt, morally obligated, as well as in some cases contractually obligated to take care of that. And I also didn't want that company to fail. So it basically went down to like 4 people, and then my partner at the time, who was running the company, basically took back the company. So it lived on and lives on as a development company. But, I had a clean break. I bought 3 suits. I went back to banking. I got a small 1-bedroom apartment. Actually, it was a studio. It's really small, like 12th and 3rd, I think. I actually could put my hands against each one of the walls.
Yeah. But this is a time when your fellow Harvard Business School classmates are probably living in maybe at least 1 bedrooms.
At least 1 to 2 bedrooms, yeah. But I got to tell you, like, the humility associated with those times is probably something that was really important. And it kind of, when you write a check to cover payroll, you feel a certain way. And that's when, entrepreneurs, when they come in and I'm not a banker that they're talking to. Like, I'm a fellow entrepreneur. I happen to be on this side of the table now as either an investment or advisor or a coach or a mentor. But, you can't really like say, oh, I know how you feel until you really know how you feel. So I think that's one of the important things is understanding, that patience in a business. And if you want to create something of value, it takes a long time. And then when you create something of value, someone's going to pay for it when you want to exit it.
Right. Okay. So tell me about Integrity Square and how it becomes the company it is now.
Sure. So 7 years ago, started Integrity Square. Those two words are important. One is integrity, goes back to the point of, you either have integrity or you don't. So we try and say if we do a handshake deal on something, the legal document should come back what we just agreed to. So we have a blacklist where, people who have kind of retraded deals that we don't want to show deals anymore because we're trying to protect our clients. And then Square is, you're allowed in the Square, you're not allowed in the Square. So I used to live in Union Square area, so say, hey, I'll meet you in the Square. So I figure, integrity in Square, that's kind of what we're.
I also sense about you that you have clearly defined boundaries, 90-degree angles, straight lines. Like when you say you either have it or you don't, there's not much wiggle room.
Yeah, no, once I went on a date once and someone's like, why didn't you call it a circle? That was a one and done.
Wrong geometric shape.
Yeah, like, come on, like I got ADD.
Deal breaker.
Yeah, I'm a little bit, anal about I've got good handwriting and posture, and it's a square. It's a square for a reason. It's not a circle. It's not an amoeba.
Yeah.
It's like straight up. So, I started the company with my partner Dave Zalkowitz, and worked on a couple of M&A assignments, and try to get our feet wet in creating our own firm. And it was tough again, starting out because people, they say like, oh, you're hanging your own shingle. Which, if you're from Long Island and you hang one shingle, you're not covering that much of the roof. My dad used to say, hey, let's clean the shingles today. I'm like, I'll just do like part of the gutter. So it takes a while to get people to know who you are and to trust you. And then, one deal begets the next deal because if you're an advisor, you got to be relevant. And you have to know the industry intel of like what people paid for, who the potential buyers are. So it took a while. And then we brought on a guy, Richard Pyle, who used to be the CFO of New York Sports Clubs, who was a great addition to our team. Then 3 people from Sagent joined us. So, we've got a 6-person team. And then about 3 years ago, we started making investments in different companies and entrepreneurs. Some of that's capital that we've got inside of Integrity Square. Some of it is capital of some of the entrepreneurs that we helped get liquidity for their companies that are now friends and partners. So it's kind of a nice circuitous relationship where people become a client, they probably become a friend, then they become a client, then they hopefully get a liquidity event, then they become an investor and partners with us on deals. So I'm trying to not lose sight of you want to be with your friends, you want to surround yourself with people that you like. And that you're having fun and you're happy doing things with.
So you're doing deals, you're doing it with integrity. The business is going well, but it's still a leap from that to let's redefine the sector and try something new. Let's call it Halo and try to tell people that this word they never heard of or never heard of in this context means something. So take me through that.
Yeah, I just read something about Jeff Bezos says like every day is day one. So like there's always this angst to like, okay, let's do something different. Let's be bigger than just like the advisor to the industry. Let's be more than just an investor. Let's create the industry. That to me is appealing. And what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to help the most people I can. And I think at the core of what I want Integrity Square to be is I want to connect the right people and I want to create, seamless interaction between people calling up and saying, hey, I need an executive. Hey, I need capital. Hey, I need this vendor, hey, I need this construction, hey, I need this real estate support. So if I can take all these relationships over the last 15 years from back when I was in a Pontiac Grand Am and eating balance bars and say, look, I know all these people. Like you need an investor in, Lexington, Kentucky. My boys are in Lexington. Like they can help you. You need a real estate in Palm Springs like my guy Brad. He's nailed down there. So that's what I want to try and do. I want to try and take that and turn it into something. And sometimes people say, well, what's the business model behind that? Or how are you going to monetize that? And, sometimes you say, look, I'm not sure. I just know that it's going to be good for people. And I know that there's going to be a way for us to make money doing it. But I think if you go into a business and say, here's my business model, and here's how I'm going to kick ass, and I'm going to be a $1 billion company. It's like, you know what? What do you have right now?
Yeah.
How can you help people? How can you solve some of the frustrations?
Maybe you're
turn it into a business.
You're the connective tissue. You're the interstate between them. If you started the interstate by saying, I'm going to be a toll booth or I'm going to be the shop on the side of the road, maybe the interstate gets built in a worse way. So you're the connective tissue first, and then good stuff will probably happen if the connectivity is legit.
Yeah, and I think you put, appropriate, toll booths on the road where it makes sense, where people say, hey, look, that's value, and I'll pay for that. And part of what we're trying to do, which you've been helpful with, which I appreciate greatly, is trying to create the Halo Talks in order to give a mouthpiece to some of these entrepreneurs and these innovators who I think could create really big companies and create positive change. And that'll turn into businesses. And if I can turn people's passion into profession, and then more people willing to spend their disposable income, not 3 Moscow Mules, but, 3 spin classes, then I got all this money coming into the sector. And then the person who comes to me is who from, Ernst & Young or JP Morgan says, I don't like my job, da-da-da-da. I have opportunities to get them into the sector.
All right. And the last thing, there's a note here that says Charlie's Angels / Batman. Could you explain this note to me?
I don't care how old you get. I think everyone still believes that there's some superhero.
Yeah.
And I've always thought, like, deep down inside, like, I think I really am Batman. And Batman just wants to do good things for people. Yeah. And doesn't really want to take any of the credit.
That's true.
Right?
Yeah.
Can't take the credit. So I always felt like, okay, in the back of in the back of the scene, I want to be able to say, you know what, I helped that person do that. I helped that person do that. And that's where I get my internal joy. And and then Charlie from Charlie's Angels is more like, you're like the conductor. Like you tell people, look, this is the path that we're going to run. Like, go get them, report back, and let me give you the tools to be successful, and come back to me if you've got questions. And so that's kind of how I'm currently living my life, is to try and release people into the wild to do great things, and be more of the person in the back. It's purposely doesn't have my name on the door for a reason. I thought about that. If your name's on the door, then you're responsible for everything, versus creating an environment and a firm that kind of stands on its own. And I want to take the Halo sector and turn it into something that becomes the equivalent of a TED Talks or a Wanderlust. Not because I want to create a big company, but because it's going to evolve into something that's bigger than what anybody expects it to be.
All right, if you're Charlie, let's go through the Angels. Who is Kate Jackson?
I would say probably the founders of Higher Dose. It's one of our investments.
Who's Farrah Fawcett?
Farrah Fawcett is probably...
She was the breakout angel.
She was the breakout. It's probably Carrie Karofsky-Glassman.
Who's Jacqueline Smith?
Well, actually, let me take that back. Okay. Let me say Andrea Rogers down in Boca Raton is Farrah Fawcett.
Mm-hmm.
And then I would say that Carrie is the Caitlin Smith. So hopefully they're comfortable with those.
Kate Jackson, who is the pert but sensible angel.
Yeah, I don't know if I want to go through these in any more detail, but we are backing 4 women-run businesses right now, and it's exciting from that standpoint as well. So yeah, we feel like we could be helpful, and we thank them for partnering with us as well.
Now, there's one last thing I want to point out. I know you're either in the square or out of the square, and the square is very important to you, but I'd like to point out that a halo is round. So in a way, you've put the circle in the square. You've united the circular and the square.
I mean, we'll note that to our next graphic designer, which may be our boy Eric Canner's wife, as she expects her second child. We're probably going to get her in part-time, and we'll figure out if the circle and the square ever, really meet.
Always connecting to the people important to you in your life. Well, thank you, Pete Moore. I'm glad we've gone through a lot of your biography and how you see life and what it means to be a dream architect. Good question to ask in all these interviews. Is there anything else that I didn't cover that you think it's important to talk about?
No, I think we're good, man. I think there's a lot that people can do if they are patient, if they put the right team in place, and go through the traditional steps of running a business, and know that you're in a business because it's going to bring joy to your life. Don't build a business that's going to control your life.
All right. Peter Forrest Moore, the CEO and founder of Integrity Square, the man behind, he invented the Halo talk and the Halo sector, really. He named it. One day we will say, who named it? The name is lost to history, but now we know it's Peter Forrest Moore.
Check my trademark guy. Thank you, Michael.